Hello, and welcome back to the Better Humans Project podcast. And I'm your host, Greg Pfeiffer. Welcome to part 3 of the Pursuit of Happiness series. We've come a long way together in this series. In part 1, we explored happiness through the lens of psychology, mapping the science of what happiness is, how it works, and how we consistently get wrong about it. In part 2, we stepped into something older and deeper, the world's greatest spiritual and religious traditions, and the extraordinary consensus they share about where genuine happiness is actually found. And today we turn to a different kind of expert altogether. Not the philosopher, not the monk, not the psychologist, but the scientist, the neurologist, the psychiatrist, the biochemist. Because happiness, that most human of experiences, turns out to have a biology. It has a chemistry, and it has a physiology that is measurable, mappable, and to a significant degree, influenceable. And understanding that biology doesn't diminish the beauty or the depth of happiness. If anything, it deepens our appreciation for it. Because when you understand what is actually happening inside your body and brain when you feel joy, connection, purpose, and peace, and when you understand what happens when those systems go wrong, you gain something extraordinarily valuable, the knowledge to work with your own biology rather than against it. This is a rich, complex, and deeply important topic. We're going to move through it with care, covering the neurochemistry of happiness, what happens biologically when happiness breaks down, how medicine intervenes, and what psychology and psychiatry offer when the biological foundations of well-being are shaken. So let's begin. Part 1, the neurochemistry of happiness, your brain's happiness system. Your brain is, among many other things, a happiness generating machine. It is equipped with an extraordinarily sophisticated system of neurotransmitters, hormones, and neural circuits whose primary function, from an evolutionary perspective, is to signal when things are going well and to motivate the behaviors that are likely to keep them that way. Understanding the key players in this system is one of the most practically useful things you can do for your own well-being. So let's meet them. Dopamine, the molecule of motivation and reward. Dopamine is perhaps the most talked about happiness chemical and also one of the most misunderstood. It is commonly described as the pleasure chemical, but that's not quite accurate. Dopamine is more precisely the anticipation and reward chemical. It is released not so much when we experience pleasure as when we expect or pursue it, and when we achieve a goal, solve a problem, or make progress towards something we want. So, this is why the pursuit of a goal often feels more intensely alive than its achievement. Why the anticipation of a holiday can feel as good as the holiday itself. Why we are wired for striving, for novelty, for the next thing. Dopamine is the fuel of motivation, and without dopamine function, the world loses its color. Things that once felt interesting feel flat. Goals feel pointless. Getting out of bed feels impossible. This dopamine deficit is one of the hallmarks of depression, and it's one of the reasons that depression feels not just sad, but grey, not painful, but empty. Serotonin, the molecule of calm and significance. If dopamine is about the pursuit, serotonin is about the feeling of being enough, of mattering, of safety, calm, and belonging. Serotonin is produced and regulated in the gut as much as in the brain, a fact that has profound implications for the connection between our physical health and our mental well-being, as we'll explore shortly. Low serotonin is strongly associated with depression, anxiety, obsessive thinking, and impulsivity. It is a primary target of the most widely prescribed class of antidepressants, the SSRIs, or selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors, which we'll discuss in detail later. Serotonin is elevated by sunlight, by exercise, by acts of kindness, by feelings of social acceptance, and fascinatingly, by the memory of past achievements and positive experiences, which means that simply recalling moments when you felt capable, valued, and connected can, at a neurochemical level, make you feel more capable, valued, and connected now. Oxytocin, the molecule of connection and trust. Oxytocin is often called the love hormone or the bonding chemical. And while those labels simplify a complex molecule, they capture something essential. Oxytocin is released during physical touch, during eye contact, during acts of generosity and care, during moments of deep connection with another person or animal. It's the neurochemical foundation of love, trust, and belonging. The research on oxytocin is extraordinary, and it reduces cortisol, the primary stress hormone. It lowers blood pressure and heart rate. It promotes healing and immune function. And it produces what researchers describe as a warm, expansive sense of safety and connection that is, neurochemically, one of the closest things to happiness that the brain can generate. And this is why human connection is not merely emotionally desirable, it is biologically necessary. Social isolation at the neurochemical level is genuinely harmful, and the consistent finding across decades of research that the quality of our relationships is the single greatest predictor of health and happiness now has a clear biological mechanism. Endorphins, the molecules of resilience and relief. Endorphins are the brain's natural painkillers, released in response to physical exertion, laughter, music, and certain foods. They produce a sense of euphoria and well-being that is familiar to anyone who has experienced what runners call the runner's high. That extraordinary sense of effortless energy and joy that emerges after sustained physical effort. But endorphins do more than relieve pain. They are deeply involved in the experience of social bonding. Research by anthropologist Robin Dunbar has found that laughter, singing, and dancing together release endorphins in a way that cement social bonds with extraordinary efficiency, which may explain why shared joy, the laughter of close friends, the experience of music and community feels so deeply satisfying. GABA, the molecule of calm. GABA amino butyric acid, mercifully shortened to GABA or GABA, is the brain's primary inhibitory neurotransmitter. Its job is to calm neural activity, reduce anxiety, and create the conditions of relaxed alertness in which genuine happiness is most accessible. Low GABA function is associated with anxiety disorders, insomnia, and a chronic sense of threat and unease. GABA is enhanced by meditation, by breath work, by certain foods, and by physical exercise. and by the benzodiazepine class of medications, though the latter, as we'll discuss, come with some significant caveats. Cortisol, the molecule that works against happiness. And then there is cortisol, the body's primary stress hormone. Cortisol is not inherently bad. In short bursts, it is essential. It sharpens focus, mobilizes energy, and prepares the body and mind for challenge. But cortisol is designed for acute, short term stress, the kind our ancestors faced when a predator appeared. It is not designed for the chronic, low grade, relentless stress that characterizes modern life. When cortisol is chronically elevated, as it is for a significant proportion of the population, it suppresses the very neurochemicals that produce happiness. It reduces dopamine sensitivity, depletes serotonin, inhibits oxytocin, and creates a sustained physiological state that is the biological opposite of flourishing. Chronic stress is not just unpleasant, it is, at the cellular level, damaging to the brain, the immune system, the cardiovascular system, and the gut. Understanding cortisol is understanding one of the most important levers of your own happiness. Because almost everything we know about managing cortisol effectively, sleep, exercise, social connection, time in nature, mindfulness, are also the things that most reliably produce happiness. Part 2, the gut-brain connection, your second brain. One of the most extraordinary discoveries in neuroscience over the last 2 decades is the extent to which our happiness is shaped not just by the brain, but by the gut. The enteric nervous system, the complex network of neurons lining the gastrointestinal tract, contains more than 100 million nerve cells. It communicates bidirectionally with the brain via the vagus nerve, and it produces approximately 90 to 95% of the body's serotonin. Let that sink in for a moment. The neurotransmitter most closely associated with mood, calm, and sense of well-being is produced almost entirely in your gut, not your brain. And this has profound implications because it means that the health of your gut microbiome, that's the trillions of bacteria that inhabit your digestive system, is directly linked to your mental and emotional well-being. Research in the rapidly growing field of psychobiotics has shown that people with diverse, healthy gut microbiomes report significantly better mood, lower anxiety, and greater emotional resilience. And conversely, disrupted gut microbiomes caused by poor diet, chronic stress, antibiotic overuse, and lack of dietary fiber are associated with elevated rates of depression and anxiety. The food you eat is, in a very literal biological sense, affecting how happy you are, not just through the energy it provides, but through its direct influence on the neurochemical systems that generate your emotional experience. Part 3, when the biology of happiness breaks down. Understanding the neurochemistry of happiness also means understanding what happens when these systems malfunction, because for a significant proportion of the population, they do. And that malfunction is not a character flaw, a weakness, or a failure of willpower. It is a biological reality that deserves to be understood and treated with the same seriousness as any other medical condition. Depression is, at its core, a disorder of the brain's happiness systems. And while it's far too complex to reduce to a simple chemical imbalance, a notion that has been significantly revised in recent years, depression consistently involves disrupted dopamine signaling, depleted serotonin function, elevated cortisol, reduced neuroplasticity, and changes in the structure and activity of key brain regions, including the prefrontal complex and the amygdala. The subjective experience of depression, the flatness, the emptiness, the inability to feel pleasure in things that once brought joy, the profound fatigue, the distorted thinking, maps directly onto these biological changes. And depression is not sadness. Sadness is a healthy emotional response to loss. Depression is what happens when the brain's capacity to generate and sustain positive emotional states is significantly compromised. Anxiety disorders involve a dysregulation of the threat response system, primarily the amygdala, which functions as the brain's alarm bell, and the HPA axis, which governs the stress response. So when this system is chronically overactivated, either through genetics, trauma, chronic stress, or a combination of all three, the result is a sustained state of perceived threat that fundamentally undermines the experience of happiness. Bipolar disorder involves dramatic dysregulation of the neurochemical systems that govern mood, swinging between states of elevated, sometimes euphoric, activation and states of profound depression. Understanding the biological basis of this condition is essential for the many people who live with it and for the people who love them. Post-traumatic stress disorder, PTSD, represents a particular kind of biological disruption in which the brain's memory and threat response systems have been altered by overwhelming experience in ways that create chronic states of hypervigilance, emotional dysregulation, and a profound difficulty accessing the states of safety and connection in which happiness is possible. Part 4. Medical interventions, how they work. When the biological foundations of happiness are significantly disrupted, medicine offers a range of interventions that can help restore the conditions in which well-being becomes possible. These are not shortcuts to happiness, and it's important to be clear about that. They are tools that address specific biological dysfunctions, and they work best when combined with the psychological, lifestyle, and relational interventions we'll discuss shortly. SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. SSRIs, which is medication like fluoxetine, sertraline, escitalopram, and paroxetine, are the most widely prescribed antidepressants in the world. They work by blocking the reabsorption of serotonin in the synapses between neurons, effectively increasing the availability of serotonin in the brain. And it's worth being honest about what SSRIs do and don't do. They don't produce happiness directly. What they do, for many people, is restore a baseline level of neurochemical function that makes the normal experiences of pleasure, motivation, and connection accessible again. They lift the floor, reducing the severity and frequency of depressive episodes rather than raising the ceiling of positive experiences. SSRIs typically take 2 to 6 weeks to reach full effectiveness, during which time side effects, nausea, disrupted sleep, sexual dysfunction are common, and they don't work for everyone. Research suggests that SSRIs are most effective for moderate to severe depression and less effective for mild depression, where lifestyle interventions may be equally or more beneficial. SNRIs, serotonin norepinephrine reuptake inhibitors. SNRIs, which are medications like venlafaxine and duloxetine, work on both serotonin and norepinephrine systems. Norepinephrine is involved in alertness, energy, and concentration, and SNRIs are particularly useful where depression is accompanied by significant fatigue, cognitive dulling, or chronic pain. Bupropion. Bupropion works primarily on dopamine and norepinephrine rather than serotonin, making it particularly useful where the primary symptoms are motivational. The low energy, inability to experience pleasure, difficulty initiating action. And it's also used as a smoking cessation aid, which speak to its effects on the dopamine reward system. Mood stabilizers. For bipolar disorder, mood stabilizers, including lithium, valproate, and lamotrigine, are the primary pharmacological treatment. Lithium, in particular, has been one of the longest track records in psychiatry and has been shown to reduce not just mood episodes, but also the risk of suicide. Benzodiazepines. So, benzodiazepines, medication like diazepam and lorazepam, enhance GABA function, producing rapid anxiolytic and sedative effects. They are effective in the short-term management of acute anxiety and panic, but they come with significant risks. Tolerance develops quickly, dependence is common, and long-term use is associated with cognitive impairment. They are generally regarded as a short-term bridge rather than a long-term solution. Ketamine and esketamine. One of the most exciting recent developments in biological psychiatry is the emergence of ketamine and its derivative esketamine as a rapid-acting treatment for treatment-resistant depression. Unlike SSRIs, which can take weeks to work, ketamine can produce significant antidepressant effects within hours. It works through a completely different mechanism, acting on the glutamate system and promoting rapid neuroplasticity, essentially helping the brain to rewire itself more quickly. For people who have not responded to multiple antidepressant medications, this represents a genuine breakthrough. In psychedelic-assisted therapy, and perhaps the most significant frontier in biological psychiatry right now, is the emerging research on psychedelic-assisted therapy. The use of substances like psilocybin, MDMA, and LSD in carefully controlled therapeutic settings. Early clinical trials have produced remarkable results, particularly for treatment-resistant depression, PTSD, and end-of-life anxiety. Now, these substances appear to work by temporarily increasing neuroplasticity and disrupting entrenched negative thought patterns, while the therapeutic context allows for profound psychological processing. Regulatory approval is still in progress in most jurisdictions, but the research is genuinely compelling. Part 5: Psychological and Psychiatric Treatments. Medication addresses biology, but biology does not exist in isolation from thought, behavior, relationship, and meaning, which is why the most effective approaches to happiness and to its restoration when it breaks down are almost always integrated ones that combine biological intervention with psychological treatment. Cognitive behavioral therapy, CBT. CBT is the most extensively researched psychological treatment in history, with a substantial evidence base across depression, anxiety, PTSD, OCD, and a range of other conditions. Its core insight is that our thoughts, feelings, and behaviors are intimately interconnected, and that by changing the patterns of thinking that fuel negative emotional states, we can change our emotional experience. In the context of happiness, CBT helps people identify and challenge the cognitive distortions that chronically undermine well-being. Catastrophizing, black and white thinking, personalization, mind reading. It builds what psychologists call cognitive flexibility, the ability to hold multiple perspectives, to question automatic thoughts, and to choose responses rather than simply react. Mindfulness-based cognitive therapy, MBCT. MBCT combines the cognitive tools of CBT with mindfulness meditation practices drawn from Buddhist tradition, bringing together the insights of part 2 and part 3 of this series in a single treatment modality. It has a particularly strong evidence base for the prevention of depressive relapse, and it works by teaching people to observe their thoughts and feelings with non-reactive awareness, breaking the cycle of rumination that drives so much chronic unhappiness. Acceptance and commitment therapy, ACT. ACT takes a slightly different approach. Rather than trying to change or eliminate negative thoughts and feelings, it teaches psychological flexibility, the ability to hold difficult experiences without being controlled by them, and to act in alignment with one's values, regardless of how one feels in the moment. It is, in essence, a secular psychological expression of the equanimity that Buddhist and Stoic traditions have described for millennia. EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. EMDR is a specialized treatment for trauma that uses bilateral stimulation, typically eye movements, to help the brain process and integrate traumatic memories that have become stuck in the threat response system. The evidence base for EMDR in PTSD is now substantial, and it represents one of the most effective tools available for restoring the biological and psychological conditions in which happiness is possible for trauma survivors. Positive psychological interventions. Distinct from treatments for mental illness, positive psychology has developed a range of evidence-based interventions specifically designed to increase well-being in the general population. These include gratitude practices, the 3 good things exercise, acts of kindness, strengths-based activities, and the cultivation of flow. These are not trivial. The research shows measurable, lasting improvements in well-being from consistent engagement in these practices. So the role of lifestyle, sleep, exercise, nutrition, and nature. No discussion of the biology of happiness is complete without addressing the extraordinary power of lifestyle factors, because the evidence for their impact on neurochemical function and mental well-being is now overwhelming. Sleep is perhaps the most fundamental. Sleep deprivation disrupts every happiness-related neurochemical system in the body, reducing dopamine sensitivity, depleting serotonin, elevating cortisol, and impairing the prefrontal cortex functions that allow us to regulate emotion and make wise decisions. Matthew Walker, neuroscientist and sleep researcher, has described sleep as the single most effective thing we can do for our brain and body health. Prioritizing sleep is not a luxury, it is the biological foundation of happiness. Exercise is the second great lever. Physical activity increases dopamine, serotonin, and endorphin production, reduces cortisol, promotes neuroplasticity, and produces measurable improvements in depression and anxiety that, in multiple studies, are comparable to antidepressant medication and often with more durable effects. The research on exercise and mental health is one of the most consistent bodies of evidence in all of medicine. Nutrition shapes the gut microbiome and therefore the serotonin system, the inflammatory response, and the integrity of the blood brain barrier. A diet rich in whole foods, fiber, fermented foods, omega 3 fatty acids, and diverse plant matter consistently supports better mental health outcomes. An ultra processed, high sugar diet consistently undermines them. And nature, the simple act of spending time outdoors, in green spaces near water, has measurable effects on cortisol levels, blood pressure, heart rate, and subjective well being. The Japanese practice of Shinrin Yoko, or forest bathing, has an emerging evidence base that strongly supports what our bodies have always known. We are biological creatures and we thrive in biological environments. Now to this week's challenge. This week's challenge is what I'm calling the biological happiness audit. I want you to spend this week paying deliberate attention to the lifestyle foundations of your own neurochemical happiness, not with anxiety or self criticism, but with genuine curiosity and compassion. Each day, track 4 things, just briefly, honestly, without judgment. Sleep. How many hours did you sleep? How rested did you feel on waking? On a scale of 1 to 10, how would you rate the quality of your sleep last night? Movement. Did you move your body today in a way that elevated your heart rate and shifted your energy? Even a 20-minute walk counts. How did it affect your mood? Nourishment. How did you nourish your body today? Not with guilt or perfectionism, just honest awareness. Did you eat in a way that supported your energy and well being, or in a way that depleted it? And connection. Did you experience genuine human connection today? A real conversation, a moment of warmth, physical touch, shared laughter. How did it affect you? At the end of the week, look at the picture that emerges, not to shame yourself, but to understand yourself. Because here is what biology tells us unambiguously. These 4 things, sleep, movement, nourishment, and connection, are not optional extras in a happy life. They are the biological infrastructure on which everything else is built. And if you find that one or more of them is consistently absent or depleted, that's not a moral failing. It's a signal. And now you have the knowledge to respond to it. How to use the companion worksheet. This worksheet is your personal companion to part 3 of the Pursuit of Happiness series. It's designed to do something practical and grounding, to bring the science we've explored today out of the abstract and into your actual life. Now, you don't need a medical degree to benefit from understanding your own neurochemistry. You simply need honesty, curiosity, and a willingness to look at how your daily life is either supporting or undermining the biological foundations of your happiness. Move through the sections in order, from the neurochemistry overview through to your personal biological audit. The weekly challenge section at the back is the heart of this worksheet. Use it each day across the week, tracking your sleep, movement, nourishment, and connection with simple honesty. If anything in this episode or worksheet raises concerns about your own mental health, please reach out to a qualified health professional. This worksheet is not a diagnostic tool, it is a mirror. Use it to see more clearly and let what you see guide you toward the support and changes that are right for you. So today we went somewhere different. We left the realm of philosophy, psychology, and ancient wisdom, and we walked into the laboratory, into the brain, the gut, the bloodstream, and the extraordinary biochemistry of human happiness. And what we found there was, I hope, both illuminating and empowering. We met the key players in the brain's happiness system: dopamine, the fuel of motivation and reward; serotonin, the quiet anchor of calm and significance; oxytocin, the neurochemical foundation of love and connection; endorphins, the brain's own painkillers and joy makers; GABA, the great calmer of the nervous system; and cortisol, the stress hormone that, when chronically elevated, works against everything else. We discovered that your gut, not just your brain, is central to your emotional well-being, producing the vast majority of your body's serotonin, and that the health of your microbiome is directly linked to your mental and emotional resilience. We sat with the reality that when these biological systems break down through depression, anxiety, trauma, or bipolar disorder, the suffering is real, the biology is real, and the need for treatment is real. There is no shame in a biological system that needs support. There is only the courage to seek it. We explored the range of medical interventions available, from SSRIs and mood stabilisers to the extraordinary frontier of ketamine and psychedelic-assisted therapy. And we looked at the psychological treatments: CBT, MBCT, ACT, EMDR, and positive psychology interventions that address the mind as well as the brain. And then, perhaps most practically, we came back to the foundations, the things that every single one of us, regardless of whether we have a clinical diagnosis, can do to support our own neurochemical happiness: sleep, movement, nourishment, connection. Four things: unglamorous, unsexy, and supported by more evidence than almost any pharmaceutical intervention in existence. And here is what I want to leave you with today. You are a biological creature, not a biological creature, as parts and 1 and 2 of this series made clear. You are also a psychological, spiritual, and profoundly individual one. But your biology matters. Your brain chemistry matters. The way you sleep, move, eat, and connect is not separate from your happiness, and it is one of the deepest foundations. And here is the extraordinary thing: almost everything that supports your neurochemical happiness also supports your psychological happiness, your spiritual happiness, and your personal happiness. The traditions we explored in part 2, the gratitude, the presence, the connection, the service, are not just spiritually wise, they are neurochemically wise. Exercise is not just biologically beneficial, it is psychologically transformative. Sleep is not just a physical necessity, it is a nightly restoration of your capacity to experience joy. The picture that is emerging across this series is one of profound integration: mind, body, spirit, and self. Not separate domains, but deeply, beautifully interconnected systems, each one influencing and being influenced by all the others. Next time, in our final episode, part 4, we'll bring it all home. We look at happiness through the most intimate lens of all, the personal and individual perspective. What does happiness look like for you? Specifically, uniquely, irreplaceably you. What is your story with happiness? What have you learned? What have you lost? What have you found? And what does the happiest version of your life actually look like? I cannot wait to explore that with you. Until then, tend to your biology, sleep well, move your body, nourish yourself, connect with the people who matter. Not because you should, but because the science is unambiguous. These things work. They are some of the most powerful happiness interventions available to any human being on earth, and they are available to you right now, today. Be curious, stay humble, keep growing. If this episode resonated with you, please share it with someone who needs to hear it, and tag us on your socials, leave a comment where I. If you'd like a copy of the accompanying worksheet, or simply want to share your story, would like to be a guest on the podcast, reach out at contact@thebetterhumansproject.com. This is Greg Pfeiffer, and this is the Better Humans Project podcast. Let's keep building better humans together. Take care.